A critical piece of code used by the Department of Defense and millions of others is being maintained by a single Russian developer. So, what some argue, half the internet runs on someone's side project. The stir in the cybersecurity community highlights concerns over the influence nation states can exert on individual maintainers. Security researchers at Hunted Labs recently highlighted FastGlob, a widely used Node.js utility for quick file and folder searches. So to get nerdy for a second, if you know what glob is as a programmer, it's a way to efficiently search through a tree of files and folders and extract names of whatever's in there. Bare minimum. It's just like a quick searching mechanism for that. So FastGlob here is it's one of a key pieces of software, key libraries, third-party libraries. That's why I went over the cybersecurity articles that I went through today, plus on previous episodes. Having a solo maintainer poses a supply chain risk to more than 5,000 software packages, including container images in Node and Department of Defense systems. Our investigation found it in more than 30 containers in approved Department of Defense system. The dependency graph on GitHub reveals that this code is used by over 27 million repositories and receives 75 approximately million downloads per. Hunted Labs reports that FastGlob maintainer MRMLNC, or Denis Malinochkin, I probably pronounced that wrong, has been living in Moscow and working for Yandex, a Russian tech giant known to cooperate with the Russian government in tracking, censoring, and oppressing citizens. And that's a risk given the obvious factors here. So I want you to imagine that your security, in the United States as American, depends on this widely used package maintained by one person in Russia, or that the software that you run on something like Discord, depends on this widely used package maintained by one person in. Yes. Now, there are no signs that the developer has ever engaged in any wrongdoing, and the developer himself spoke up and said, I've never been asked to manipulate the tool, to introduce secret changes, to do other types of data collection or otherwise nefarious acts. That is great. I'm glad that he said that, because it instills some hope in that it hasn't been hacked or used in any particular way. But you can imagine that your attack vector is 1. That's it. Your attack vector is 1. And if Russia really wanted to put pressure on this guy, could they? They could. And then there's some interesting insights on open source itself. Almost all open source is literally one person. So of the 11.8 million open source projects tracked by a website called ecosystem.ms, so ecosystems just with a dot between the E and the M, about 7 million are maintained by a single person. The actual figure will be even larger because 4 million projects have an unknown number of maintainers. Single developer maintained code comprises almost half of the most popular repositories on NPM, which is also where this FastGlob Department of Defense stuff is being housed. About half of the 13,000 most downloaded NPM packages are one person. Many solo developers also own more than a single package, and likely not many of them have the proper resources they need. So there you go. That's what's propping up a huge portion of the tech industry today, because it doesn't just affect the Department of Defense, for example. This affects programmers as well, because programmers also have to pull in these packages in order to run something like Visual Studio Code. Yeah, which I covered on this stream. Visual Studio Code would rely on FastGlob because they use these kinds of packages, and that's how they do things like show you a tree of your project folder and so on and so forth. So you have a multitude of things hinging on a single point of failure. It would be not unfathomable. It would be actually quite reasonable to assume that this stuff is super brittle because it is. It's super brittle.